Welcome everyone to another episode of Coach Unboxed, project by Unboxed Sports, an agency elevating professional tour tennis coaches on and off the court. Today, I'm joined by Kamau Murray, who you may know as the US Open champion and French Open runner-up with Sloane Stephens. But today, we're going to be talking to Kamau about his tennis trajectory, how he became a very successful businessman, to also having one of the most incredible tennis facilities in the Midwest to provide more access to tennis and higher education. And we're going to talk a little bit also his thoughts on being a tennis coach in all levels and how he got there. Welcome, Kamau. Really appreciate it and looking forward to talking to you. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me.
I would love for people to know who Kamau is and where he came from. You grew up on the south side of Chicago. I've heard that you actually had a dream of becoming a basketball player. You're pretty tall, but you ended up in tennis.
You know, my brother was a big time star basketball player. So when I was 7 years old, that summer, my parents took his AAU team to play the Senegalese national team in Africa. And I had to obviously sort of tag along, right? Which was great. But I came back to Chicago July 27th. And at that time, all the summer camps were basically over, right? In full, except for the tennis camp in my neighborhood, because nobody wanted to play tennis in my neighborhood. So, my mom went to the park. My godfather, Reggie Williams, was a retired police officer and a tennis fanatic. So he said, hey, bring him over to Jesse Owens Park. They've got plenty of room and the camp is still going on for another couple of weeks. And so my mom drove me there. We pulled up to the park and the coach said, it's $12 for the rest of the summer. And then my mom said, get out the car. You're about to play tennis. So, I got out the car with basketball shoes on, baggy shorts, that kind of deal. And from then on, just started playing tennis for the last 2 weeks of that summer. At the end of those 2 weeks, the guy recommended a free clinic indoors during the school year. So this coincidentally was less than a mile from my grammar school. So my mom, just made me continue doing tennis, after school because it was free. And, I had 3 siblings. So it was one less kid that she had to pick up after school. So I basically now had to walk from school to tennis every day. So 2 hours a day of free babysitting 5 days a week.
But I'm assuming you sort of loved tennis or you really got into it, or were you still trying to play basketball and whatnot, or how did that go?
Yeah, no, I don't think you develop a love for it after 2 weeks. It just was like, hey, I'm just doing this because my mom says I have to be here. Basketball at the YMCA was a couple days a week, so I still did that, right? So I was still playing. They used to call it YBA on 63rd and Stony Island. And my dad was the coach, the basketball coach. So I still played basketball 2 or 3 days a week. I thought I was pretty good. In addition to tennis, I would leave tennis 2 of those days and then go straight to basketball practice and then do homework till midnight. And then Saturday mornings, we had basketball games. I played basketball and tennis all the way till I was 15 years old. But basketball was probably my first love. And then tennis was just something that really was kind of reversed. I had opportunity to play tennis more regularly than basketball. So it's really the reverse of how things exist now.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly.
More people have more opportunity to play basketball 5 days a week and not tennis. Just a rare sort of accident at that situation.
Because it's interesting, right? A lot of people have this notion of tennis being very expensive to get into, get access. And also I wanted you to touch on, you came on, let's say, from an African-American perspective, right? Arthur Ashe, I think you were born on the same year that he retired. And then also Katrina Adams from Chicago as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know those people, as you were growing? Did they inspire you by any means? Or how was that relationship and how that impacted you?
So ironically enough, I played at a place called the Hyde Park Racquetball Club, and that was like the black mecca of tennis. So Katrina Adams played at that club. Donald Young played at that club. Taylor Townsend played at that club. But there was a tournament in Chicago called the Virginia Slims, where Pam Shriver, Zena Garrison, Chris Everett, Chandler Rubin, Venus Williams, all of them played, and they would come and practice at our club. I actually met Zena Garrison at the club back in the day, and now she's one of my best friends and talk to her 5 times a day. But Pam Shriver, I was a ball kid for Pam Shriver, ball kid for Chanda. I remember meeting Robin Givens there, and then actually later on ended up coaching her son Billy. So, I grew up seeing Katrina play, right? Mm-hmm. And then when I was in high school, I was seeing Donald Young on the court playing with his father, and Taylor playing on the court with Big Donald. It was actually like a rare rare kind of gift from God, to have that sort of environment, be really close to my school. But that environment doesn't really exist anywhere in the country. And so that's kind of what we're trying to recreate sort of with Excess Tennis. But, there was Todd Ackerman. I can name 5 or 10 really good players that played in that club because it was really the only club on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, so for you, it felt normal, let's say, that community, from all the way to professional to like a lot of people playing tennis, that for you growing up, you had to guide yourself through junior tennis and figured out how to go to that next step. But that just felt normal for you, which helped, I'm assuming, to see, okay, I can go further.
Yeah, like my parents weren't tennis players at all. My mom actually, the very first tennis match my mom ever came to was a 2017 U.S. Open final.
Wow.
Right. So I'm 40 years old. You know what I mean? I was just basically a drop-off pickup kind of tennis player. My parents weren't sitting on the court during lessons. They weren't picking up balls. My brother was 6'9", and my dad was a former basketball player. And my other sisters played volleyball and ran track and swam. So my mom was basically the taxi cab driver. So she didn't have time to really sit in one place for a couple hours and watch somebody hit tennis balls. That was sort of my upbringing in tennis, but I had good examples. I mean, Katrina, seeing her, what tournament she played and how she went along, what coaches did she work with. And we had Artie Buffer, Malcolm Buffer, Richie Gray, Todd Ackerman. We had there were so many people ahead of me that I watched who were they coached by? What did they do? Right. And then would follow behind them and trying to sort of do what they did, get rides home from them. So, but it really was, I decided when I was ready to leave a coach and move to a next coach, I would tell my parents, all right, I'm done with this guy. I need to move to this guy. Right. Well, I'm done with this.
So you made your own decisions.
I made my own decisions. And they just were like, hey, whatever, if you say so. They weren't thinking at this point that I was going to get good or get a college scholarship or become a professional tennis coach and, commentate. They just was like, hey, this is one less kid I have to pick up. When I dropped Kamau out of school at 8 o'clock in the morning, I don't have to worry about him again until 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And so it was great. And then even then, there were a lot of like African-American lawyers and doctors who played at the club, and a lot of people who lived close to my house. So a lot of times I would just get my own ride home. It was actually really, really convenient.
So that sort of showed the pathway as well for you to, even if you wanted to become something else apart from playing tennis, that tennis was a way to continue to stay connected to those people. And I guess when you were in high school, you got approached and to get a scholarship to go to Florida A&M. Was that an easy decision for you to say, I'm just going to go to college, get my degree, and I want to go into the business world? Or were you thinking as well, I want to become a professional tennis player? What was your mindset at that point?
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely was not thinking about playing pro tennis.
Why?
I went to HBCU. You know what I mean? And I think at that time, HBCUs weren't like top tier tennis, weren't considered to be top tier tennis. So like, Michigan, UCLA. There are certain universities that if you get a scholarship to those universities, you have a fighting chance at playing on tour, right? If you go to UGA, you go to UCLA, you probably, could end up at least playing some challengers. And Florida A&M wasn't that at that time. Now, by the time I left there, we ended up being winningest program of all sports teams at any HBCU. We made the NCAA tournament, lost to Florida. We built a real good tennis tradition there. We became the first HBCU to be top 50 in the country, ITA. But when I went there, I wasn't thinking I was a springboard or an on-ramp to pro tennis.
So you were thinking more like this is just a pathway for me to get free education, get my degrees, and then see where I go from there.
Yeah, even there, my connection to Florida A&M, there was a guy named LaTron Mason who was from Chicago, and he was the grad assistant coach. He's the one, my parents, again, not being solely into it. My brother played basketball for DePaul, and when he was in high school, they were knocking down the door. Oklahoma, Ohio, they were all coming to the house to do in-home visits. And back in basketball days, they were paying players, right, under the table. So it was like, the coaches reached out. The coaches flew in to watch games. And it really didn't exist in tennis. So I would say even from my college search, we didn't make a video. We didn't send it out to coaches. We didn't start contacting coaches August 1st, the summer before my senior year. You know what I mean? In my house, it was a basketball house. So coaches came to us, right? And we thought that was so really second semester of my senior year, I'm looking up and I'm like, I got to find a school, you know what I mean? And then we found out that in tennis, you need to be reaching out because there's only 4.5 scholarships to fill a team of 8. You be more proactive than you do with basketball. Very different. So I'm very thankful for A&M because they actually There was a conduit sort of between Chicago and FAMU,
Yeah.
and they reached out to me, and that was like sort of the few options that I had, just because I didn't know. I'm sitting at home, the
Yeah.
arms folded, like,
We're
hey,
waiting.
waiting for somebody to come to me. Like, where's my car?
Yeah.
Where's my bag of money? You know what I mean? So do it like basketball does it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so you go there, you get your bachelor's degree, you get your master's degree as well. And at that point, you're like, well, I'm gonna go to the business world and go on into live this American dream of just start working. Did you have, let's say, a dream at that point of I'm gonna do this and going to do something else, or like I just want to get into work first?
when I was in college, I was teaching at a place called the East Bank Club in Chicago, and I had met a bunch of business people. So I had the opportunity to teach the CEO of Boeing at that time, a guy named Alan Mullally, Stedman Graham. I mean, I taught a lot of really good people who, during the tennis lesson, we sit and talk and have conversation about
Yeah.
career and business and that kind of thing. Even at Florida A&M, in the state of Florida, there were so many like pro-ams at private country clubs, and college players would go and play pro-ams with successful business people. A lot of the people in the accounting firms play tennis. I was
Yeah.
playing with the partners and senior partner, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
at the firm. So all of my internships weren't normal internships. When I was done with school, I had, I'll say, a lot of sort of job options because of the
Mhm.
relationships that were built through tennis. And I had the opportunity to work for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals 2 summers. And so I went back to work for Pfizer.
Mhm.
So I didn't really go looking for a bunch of jobs. I was kind of said like, hey, I like these people. They like
Yeah.
me. After I graduate with my master, I'm gonna come back and work for them. So that's really, how I ended up working for Pfizer. Moved to New York City, worked there for a few years, then moved back to Chicago. But it was all through like the relationships built on a tennis court.
Yeah.
You know
And
what I mean?
it's interesting, right? Because I think you don't find that a lot in other sports. When in tennis, when you have that one-on-one teaching, playing, you get to know a lot of high up people or high income because it's a sport of the elites per se. You decided to move to Chicago and get back, I guess, more involved in tennis. Was it just like, I just want to do this on the side because I still love the sport? Or I'm assuming it wasn't because of financial, that you wanted to just continue to build your income. What was the decision of like going back and start teaching again?
Yeah, no, it just was. So when I was living in New York for 2 years, I mean, there's a couple things. The great thing about working in New York City is it teaches you how to work. You're at work before your boss, 7 a.m., and you leave after your boss leaves. So you're there till 8 p.m. And then you eat pizza, right? So right, and go out for drinks. So I think that the New
Yeah.
York experience really taught me how to have a full work day. In addition, my dad was an attorney when I was growing up, and so he always didn't get home till 9 o'clock at night. So I wasn't accustomed to getting home at 4:30, 5 o'clock. And so when I made the decision to move from New York to Chicago, it was just, hey, cost of living is high in New York. I didn't really have the opportunity to play tennis at all because good
Mhm.
luck trying to get a court in Central Park.
Yeah.
One, number two, I'm not getting off work till 9 o'clock. And I hated taking the train. I mean, man, taking the subway in New York kind of sucks, man. You got the rats, you got it just hated sort of that sort of basic lifestyle. So I was like, hey, I can go
Yeah.
back to Chicago, be around my family, have a car, have a 2,500 square foot apartment instead of a
Yeah.
400 square foot apartment. And I took a transfer with Pfizer and I started working in sales. And in sales, I was getting off work at 4:30, 5 o'clock. You're not married, no kids. It's like, now what do I do? And so I just got re-engaged with the tennis community and started just, sort of helping kids. I mean, my mom and dad set really great examples for me on giving back and mentoring. Mom tutored people in our basement after school. Matter of fact, the CEO of Chicago Public School System was one of my mom's students, and my mom tutored her in
Wow.
our basement every day. I saw that, hey, when you come home, you keep working. My dad, like I said, was a basketball coach at the YMCA. So I just started coaching kids in the park for $25 just to sort of keep busy, give back, stay engaged with the community. I don't want to say I loved coaching at the time, but it felt good to make a few extra dollars. There were a couple good kids in the neighborhood who had some potential. Again, in my neighborhood, there aren't a lot of former Division I college tennis players just
Yeah.
at the park. If you have that skill and have that sort of reference that you can bring back to your community, I
Hmm.
decided to do that. But I was still working a full-time job. I
Yeah.
never thought that, hey, I'm gonna like quit my $100,000 job with a free car, free cell phone, free computer, free internet at home, all those kind of perks. Never thought I was going to give all that up to teach kids
Yeah.
$25 an hour. But it was good. as a result of that, a couple of the kids started getting better, doing well, traveling, start playing Midwest regional tournaments and nationals, and I took 4 people to Easter Bowl. You know what I mean? Then it was
So
like,
you
oh,
start
okay,
getting back into the tennis
yeah,
environment and seeing it. And that's how you got a chance to meet some of the pros.
yeah. So I started, traveling with kids, taking kids to Peachtree City Girls 14 Super Nationals, right? And
Yeah.
it was like using my vacation days from work to actually
Yeah.
do this. You kind of got the bug, and they're like, at the time I was young, I'm like 27, 28 years old.
Yeah.
I'm showing
Hmm.
up to tournaments with these old
Hmm.
crusty coaches who were like 60 years old, right? And people thought I was the player's brother, right? Or, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. It was like, oh, your parents let you come with him? I'm like, yeah, I'm a grown man. I'm not
Yes.
22, even though I have the baby face. The academy just started growing. And then the opportunity came for me to take over the club that I grew up playing in. So the club that me and Katrina and those people, the opportunity came for me to sort of take over the lease for the building. One of the things about teaching in a cold weather climate is if you don't have a roof, you have a summer camp. When October, November comes, it's over. And so whatever progress or talent you've assembled in the summer, now it just disperses in the wintertime. In the back of my mind, I wonder if there was an indoor opportunity at some point. We could take over the club that I grew up playing in. And then I just went around to the neighborhood and assembled all the coaches who were also in the parks and not working for private tennis clubs and said, hey, I'm going to take over
Hmm.
the club. I'll make sure the rent gets paid. I'll run the business operation.
And what year is this?
This is 2008.
2008.
October 4th, 2008 is when we actually moved into the
So
indoor.
you still have a full time with the pharmaceutical. You take over a club, basically, doing the admin and getting people because you could not be there for the first 8 hours of the day. So you had to figure it out other people to be running the club.
Exactly.
But you had this vision of this can work. And so you just decided to take basically 2 full-time jobs.
Basically, yeah. So, and it was the finance. I mean, the hardest part about the tennis club is how do you pay the mortgage, right? How do you, and how many
Hmm.
hours, how many courts do you need to sell per day to sort of run a break even business? This wasn't like a money making venture. It was like, hey, to break even, we need to sell 90 courts a day. And so when you start working that math, then right, I have a master's in finance, right? So I can sit here and kind of compute what that
Yeah.
makes, right? If we're at 50% capacity, can we make this thing work? And the
Hmm.
answer was yes. And so my parents actually mortgaged their house to loan me money to sort of start the club. So I
Yeah.
really had to do some careful calculations because I'm not trying to have my family home, right, go into
Uh-huh.
foreclosure with my sort of, tennis gamble.
Yeah.
And so grateful for them for believing in me.
The investors.
They were my first investors. So it was great. But because of that, a lot of kids were able to play tennis. A lot of kids were able to learn to
Hmm.
um, play tennis and get college scholarships. A lot of African American pros were able to get jobs, right, and work and earn a living. I mean, one of the great things about tennis is it's triple minimum wage jobs. So if
Yeah.
minimum wage is 16, 20 in Chicago, tennis coaches are making $45 an hour, and they're wearing sweatpants, and they're
Yeah.
making their own schedule. So you
Yeah.
talk about creating jobs for blacks in tennis. I mean, these are
Hmm.
triple minimum wage jobs that are not high stress, fun, passionate. You don't have a boss sort of watching over you, right? You kind of
Yeah.
control your hour, your content, that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's also like a gratifying part of it is creating an on-ramp for blacks in tennis through jobs,
Yeah.
internships, summer jobs, coaching. And then through that, I had the opportunity to work with Zena Garrison and Taylor Townsend when Taylor was trying to, when she first was making her transition from juniors to the pros.
Hmm.
Had a relationship with her mother, Sheila Townsend, for a long time. And then Taylor played doubles with Sloane at Indian Wells, and we went out to LA a few weeks earlier to practice UCLA. And LA is where it's at, right?
Yeah.
Right around
Very the
March and
tennis.
tennis. LA, UCLA
Yeah.
is where it's at. You got Dimitrov, you got Sharapova, you got everybody was kind of practicing at UCLA right ahead of Indian Wells.
Yeah.
So we ended up practicing with Sloane a couple of days, ended up playing doubles with her at Indian Wells. And so that's how I got acquainted with Sloane.
So you have a full-time job at pharmaceutical. You're running basically a club full on, and you're traveling now with professional tennis player, right? So that's 3 jobs as you go on, and you get to meet Sloan, and that's how that relationship started. Because I think everyone knows you winning that Grand Slam with Sloan, getting to the French Open, final, but no one knows really that how you started. You have two jobs, two full-time jobs, one of taking care of your parents' money, and especially in sales, you need to show that you're selling. And then you see this life of traveling and making an impact on a higher level of tennis. How you were able to accommodate these three jobs?
Yeah. So at the time, I quit working pharmaceuticals January 27th of 2015. I was in Australia at the time. Zena and I were working with Taylor Townsend. So that was like my last day. And at that point, it was like we were raising money for the center, right? So we had been in our old center from 2008 to 2015, and we were starting to raise money to build a new center. And right around that time, we got close to raising all the money. The coaching thing was going well. I was like, okay, I think I can make this work now, right? And so that's when I left my job. But at the day I left, the previous year's year-end numbers came out, and I was number one in the region for a drug called Novolog, right? So I was doing well at my job, you know what I mean? But at that point, it was clear that being gone for 3 weeks in a row, I was not going to be able to maintain full-time job and do this, right? And my boss actually was a great guy by the name of Bob Mann, and his daughter was an Olympic swimmer. He was totally understanding, you know what I mean? That,
So
hey,
you call Bob and it's like, hey, I'm here in Australia,
yeah,
Grand Slam. Hope you understand.
yeah. He had knew, while I was coaching back at home, I was coaching after work. So it was all good, right? But we were building the center. We were starting to sort of get close to being able to break ground on the center. So the time was right. So from there, I just focused on coaching. Then later that year, so November 2015, is when I sort of started working with Sloane. So I went with her to Luxembourg, which was our first tournament together. And she lost first round, actually. It was like I wasn't thinking I was going to get in a job. I took a player to the first WTA tournament together, like alone, and she loses first round. You know what I mean? But anyway, we spent the offseason together 2015, and January 2016, we started working full-time together.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was just coaching and running my center.
Running your center.
Yeah.
In that time, you already had raised the money, so you moved to a new facility.
Well, we had raised enough money to break ground.
To break ground.
So we broke ground July 27, 2015. So we were under construction, right?
So this is the beginning of Access Tennis.
Yeah, this is the beginning of us having Access Tennis started back in 2005, but it was the beginning of us having the 13-acre campus that we have now.
Breaking ground 2015, you started working with Sloane, which at that time, one of the very future promises of U.S. tennis. How was that pathway for you truly being on tour full time and developing this professional tennis player after basically developing kids for what did you take it from what you had learned by developing kids to her, or was it just completely new experience for you?
Yeah, so I mean, back when we started coaching, she would come to Chicago some weeks, so we would just go back and forth, to sort of try to make it work for each other. We practiced indoors in Chicago. We ran a lot of kids, so it was great to sort of have her here a couple times a year. And then tennis is all about like a relationship, right? So when I say back then, there weren't a lot of stats out. There wasn't the Hawkeye, all the data, all that kind of thing. So we're talking about 2015 here, right? And one of the things on tour is a lot of these guys, they go from playing the tour to coaching, right? I think at that time, without the benefit of the video, I spent a lot of time like building forehands and backhands or fixing full Western grips and trying to bring it back to like a semi-Western or whatever it is, right? So I think that really benefited me early because it allowed me to help the player break down technical deficiencies or limitations or strike zone limitations or imperfections in movement, right? Do they cross over or do they just take off and run? You can play behind them. It was all those things that I think I learned being on my hands and knees, building strokes from scratch. And that allowed me, with just the use of video or sitting there scouting matches, to see, oh, yeah, with that grip, they're not going to be able to hit the ball above their shoulder. Or with that grip, they're not going to be able to hit the ball slice. So I think that allowed me to be really clear in terms of, how to beat a player. Right? Where are opportunities to make this player a little bit uncomfortable, make them miss, make them hit short where you can step up and attack them. When you get with a new player, I always say coaches like to come in and just change everything about the player. And I think having built players from 5 years old to 17 and also getting players from other clubs, right? In Chicago, where there's 10 indoor clubs, you have a lot of opportunity to also get a lot of 15-year-olds
Yeah.
who already can hit a ball, but maybe need a little tweaking. And it's too late to sort of start over and rip their game to shreds. So you learn how to just make incremental improvements in players. And so that also helped me work with Sloane, who, before I got with Sloane, she had been 11 in the world, right? She wasn't that at the time we, joined forces, but she had been 11. So it's not like you're going to like teach this player a whole lot of new stuff, right? But you can make incremental improvements to make this player 10% better. How do we make that 10% better? And so that was sort of what I focused on. So I look at sort of the two areas of my expertise at the time was looking at grips. And some of these players from Europe had these real funky grips, right?
Yeah.
So looking at grips to see what opportunities were to exploit them. And then also, how do you make this player who's, almost a finished product, make them 10% better? So we joined, forces in January 2016, and she won 3 tournaments in 4 months. Yeah. And at that time, she had won 1 tournament her whole pro career.
People don't realize, right? When you say even winning 1 title for the year, it's extremely hard because every tournament you start with 32, 64, 128 in Grand Slams, and one person's winning. And there's a lot of top 20 players out there, and sometimes even top 10 players that have not won many titles because it's extremely hard to actually win a title. So winning 3 titles in 4 months, it's not very common.
No, it's hard. A successful top 50 player, if you win 1 tournament a year and you semi another and quarters a couple others, that's a pretty good year. But winning 3 titles in 4 months is like, whoa. That was really sort of what solidified my position, right? Because when Sloane hired me, I didn't have 4 or 5 pro players under my belt. I didn't play pro tennis. I didn't work for tennis. I didn't work for the federation, or I didn't work for the U.S. I wasn't a USTA national coach, that kind of thing. So there were a lot of raised eyebrows when she hired me to be her coach.
What do you think from your coach perspective? What was the key of her winning those 3 tournaments? Her confidence just went up? Was it those adjustments in technique? Was just more the strategic part? What were those things that you saw just happening back to back to back of her being able to execute?
Yeah, so I think it's all of that. We spent the off season together. So you make 10% improvements in every area that you can, right? So by January, I would like to think she was a better player than November 1st. And then, from a scouting standpoint, I wasn't a player that was jaded. Oh my God, you have to play this player. She's so good. She won 3 tournaments last year. I wasn't that guy. I was looking at the player from a very fresh lens. She's just okay. I was looking at him from a very vulnerable eye. Like not from a very respectful eye where I'm like fearing this girl. Oh, this girl's so good because she won this and she won junior this. It wasn't like that. She hits the ball like this. Here's how you break her down. And I think me sort of making every player vulnerable probably instilled a lot of confidence in Sloane.
Yeah.
And being very clear on, here's how you beat this player. Here's how you can make them uncomfortable. And I think being a very clear communicator, which I pride myself on being a very clear communicator, even if with my use of swear words. Anybody will tell you, you always know where you stand. He's not going to beat around the bush, or he's going to tell you exactly how it is, whether you like the way it comes out or not. So I think being a very clear communicator for a professional tennis player who is under stress in the middle of a tennis match and just needs one clear way to hold serve at 3 all in a second, a huge benefit. Also enjoying time on tour. Traveling, out of 4 months, 16 weeks, you're probably traveling 13 of those weeks. That time has to be enjoyable for both people. And so I think
because tennis is so specific. It's like one-on-one, right? It's not that you're traveling with a team and then you have 10, 15, 20 people that you're sort of sharing your attention. It's like 101.
Yeah, it's one-on-one. There was no hidden partner with us at the time. It was like I was the hidden partner and the coach, right? And got to go to dinner and be the dinner buddy. So you got to make that very enjoyable. And then, also just having respect for the player to say, hey, tell me what makes you comfortable. Like on game day, I do whatever you need. You need me to go get a hair tie. You need me. Today is about winning. So whatever needs to happen today, I've got no ego about it. Let's just win. So what do we need to do? I think just letting the pro lead in that area is great, right? It's always like a negotiation. I'm not one of the guys that was, hey, I coach 5 pros and here's my method. It was like, no, here's how I think you can be better. Here's the things we need to work on. You tell me how you want to work on them, right? We can negotiate parts of this. Certain parts of this that we have to do. Certain parts of it we can negotiate, right? And then you develop a partnership and a respect. Our first tournament together that year, 2016, Auckland, she went and she won. She beat Wozniacki. She beat Gergis. She beat Karina Whithoff at the time was really coming up and was a
Yeah.
really good player. So those were some good players. Like she had never beat Wozniacki ever before. So it also helps when the player believes in what you say.
Yeah.
Right. So that first tournament created some belief and some trust. And then after that, if I said jump, she'd say, okay, how high? So for the first 4 months, it was like a lot of good sort of trust going both ways. And then, you let them leave without falling off a cliff, right? When they start getting too far ahead, then you pull them back. I mean, these are adults, right? They are the boss. And so you got to let them lead, but not get too far ahead of themselves, right? Where they fall off a cliff.
You touched on this is what I need to win. And I've heard some of your stories that you have to do some crazy things, right? Like while she's doing the match and figuring out a way to win, apart from the actual coaching. What is one story that she won? We got that.
I remember there's a couple of them. So I think 2018 Miami Open, we had like a rough patch. I remember after Sloane won the U.S. Open 2017, she lost 10 matches in a row. Everybody was like, oh, you got to fire the coach. You need a new coach, right? Normally a player loses 10 matches in a row on tour. They're getting rid of the coach, right? So
not if she won the Grand Slam.
Yeah, even then, you see players win a Grand Slam with a coach who will fire him at the end of the year. You know what I mean?
So that's true.
I remember that we were in Miami and I was working with a guy named OG. He and I were kind of coaching together. And Sloane wanted this salad. She was like, my favorite salad. It's in Fort Lauderdale. So we were like, look, we need to just end this little streak here. Whatever you need to do, we need to win. You know what I mean? So all right, I want y'all to go give me a salad. So every day during the Miami Open, after practice, after match, we drove an hour there and an hour back to go get the salad. And again, it was like, this is about winning. So you want this, we go get the salad tomorrow, you're going to show up and we're going to work. It worked, you know what I mean? That was the first Masters 1000 title. And then also, I can remember, was it U.S. Open 2018? First round against Kalinina. Mm-hmm. Well, this was before Kalinina now is a solid player, right? She can win every week. But at the time, she was, kind of coming up. And I was like, oh, this girl can play. And I remember Sloane looking just a little bit like tired, hungry. So I remember they split sets. And I was like, all right, I think she needs some food. So I ran out of the coach's box, U.S. Open.
So that's on Arthur Ashe.
On Arthur Ashe.
Because she's a returning champ.
Returning champion playing opening day on Arthur Ashe. I'm like, oh, no, we're not losing. We're not losing first round. No, we can't go down like this, right?
Yeah.
So I leave the coach's box, run all the way out the stadium, run to the elevator, or took the stairs to the 5th floor, got the sushi, didn't even pay for it. With my grabbed the sushi, took the stairs down to the locker room. Madison was going into the locker room and I said, give it to Sloane, tell her to eat it. And then ran back to my, this was between the second and third set. That was just like, look, we're not going down.
Yeah.
Find some energy and find some, we got
to all those things, that trust, it's the connectivity that you build with the players knowing what they need at that point. 2017, you win the US Open as a coach, right? You succeed in being a salesperson, you succeed in being a businessman, you open your own facility. And now especially for an American coach and also an African-American coach, win a Grand Slam at home, US Open. How did that feel for you? I achieved what I wanted to achieve. I won more. You were really less than a year and a half on tour, right? How did that feel?
So it was good. But I'll say, when I dig into a process, I get crazy into it. So my family didn't come to the U.S. Open. It wasn't this is not a vacation. So the wife and kids cannot come to New York during a tournament. I'm working. So it was really go to practice, come home, watch video for the next tournament, sit here and watch YouTube. I had 2 laptops, so I'd have 2 videos playing. I would leave my hotel room just a couple times a day to go get coffee. Famous for having 5 cups of coffee per day. And so I'll be honest, I wasn't really enjoying it or aware, oh man, we're about to make history kind of thing.
This is work.
I was like, man, how do we make tomorrow good? How do we find the right practice partner? How do we practice at the right time? What times I would go to the supervisor's office and say, hey, I know you have an idea on schedule for 2 days from now. About what time do you think she's going to play? And then you try to practice at the right time. And then you try to figure out who can we hit with who resembles that player. You can lose a slam on an off day by having a bad practice, wrong practice partner, practicing at the wrong time, having food poisoning. And so I was really sort of in that process of how do I help her not mess this up? right?
Yeah.
At the end of the tournament, honestly, it was like relief. I remember sitting on the floor of my shower, just letting the water just run on me because I was so stressed out and just sort of like
Adrenaline.
relieved and like glad it was over because it's super stressful, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to like help them not get antsy and not look too far ahead or not even realize what's about to happen. So it's never like, oh, are you nervous? No, it's none of that. It was like, oh, okay, oh, tomorrow, okay, cool. No big deal. You're trying to minimize where we are so that
Yeah.
they don't get scared. 'Cause a lot of
Yeah.
times players kind of get like
Oh yeah.
scared or shocked, right? Because a lot of players, when they grow up playing, they have a dream of winning a Grand Slam. But when it becomes real, they kind of take a step back like, oh, shoot, I'm about to win a
Yeah.
Grand Slam. And then that's
Yeah.
where you mess it up. That's where you blink and you mess it up, right? And so you're trying to help the player
Stay grounded.
turn off ESPN. Like, don't watch. Let's
Don't
go.
watch your top 10.
Yeah, don't watch SportsCenter Top 10. Don't watch Chrissy and Chris Fowler and everybody else on the desk talking about your chances and what you need to do. Turn TV off. Like, watch something else.
Yeah.
Like, go do Netflix or something. So it's
Yeah.
all of that. Also controlling the information during those 2 weeks that goes into the player's head.
Yeah.
Because a conversation can change your mindset. Not even a conversation you're having with someone. A conversation other people are having about you can change your mindset. And so it's always trying to protect those conversations as well. And so it was very stressful. I mean, at the end of it, it was very gratifying, but it was very stressful. And then when you lose 2 matches in a row after that, then you're looking like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a given that you win another one. I think when you win one as a player and as a coach, you feel like, okay, I'm going to win another one. And then you realize like how hard it is to win again. And then you look back like, man, I really took that 2 weeks for granted. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't share it. I didn't have people come and experience it with me. You're trying not to mess it up, right? And mess up the routine. And I'm very superstitious, right? So if you weren't here on day 1, you can't be here on day 14, right?
And how did that, I guess, reiterate now to you made another final at the French Open. Did that change, or how did that change from that experience at the US Open to the French Open?
Oh, no, I think that one, you realize the significance of where you are, right? And you realize the opportunity to get back there and to, not people have to say, oh, it was a fluke, or they got lucky, or they just got hot. When you win one Grand Slam, you say, oh, they got hot, right? And then the next year, you're like, no. This is sort of where I'm supposed to be, right? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So that was another sort of great 2 weeks. Very stressful, sort of another 2 weeks. Again, trying to control all the variables, control the narrative, control the input. But Sloane plays great on clay. We had started to build some confidence after winning Miami the month before. And so that also was a really good experience. I mean, really, Sloane was up a set and a break in the final against Halep, and then Halep comes and does what she does. She stays with you. So yeah, that one I still sort of have nightmares about. I'll be honest. You know what I mean? I take losses very hard. All my players will say the next morning they'll be over it, and I'm like under my covers. You know what I mean? Because as a coach, you always say, man, what could I have said in the match? What could I have done in the middle of that match to change the momentum? And you also got to remember back then in the WTA, you could go on the court and coach.
Yeah.
Not
in
the slams, right? But you can go out. And so like every time we lost, I was like, damn, I should have said this. Or I shouldn't have said that. Could I have like made them take a bathroom break? Like, what could I have done or said to help change the outcome of the match? I take a lot of responsibility in that. And all of my players like losses because I don't like to lose, right? I try to win or at least do well in everything I do.
Yeah.
Whether it's a job, an internship, building a club, having a group, running a tournament, commentating. I try to like prepare, right? And think about all the variables. So with that approach, it always helps you be better and like just pay attention to detail because at pro tennis, it's all about the details. When you look at the difference between wins and losses, there's only a 10% difference between the person.
All the inches.
All the inches, right? Or serve percentage. If you look at like every category, there's only a 10% difference between the player that won and the player that lost. Whether it's first serve percentage, whether it's return serve percentage, whether it's winners or unforced errors, it's never more than 10%. And so that sort of really slim margin, that's the responsibility of the coach.
What's the, you started then working with Monica Puig, also another great tennis player. Through that, even where I guess you were still with Sloane, you it finally got constructed, right? Access tennis. You need to figure it out because now you have bigger facility to understand how to manage. And also then that year later, I believe you start working with Monica. How was that transition with players and how Access tennis also is today?
Yeah, so Sloane won the U.S. Open September 9th of 2017, and we moved into the facility. We had basically done with construction as she was winning the U.S. Open. So we moved in December 9th of 2017. And it was great. I mean, we've got like 30 people that work at the club, so I don't do the majority of the hard work. My staff, they're the ones that are boots on the ground every day, hands and knees, teaching players how to like hold the racket, hit the ball, finish, that kind of thing, right? And then we have great administrative staff that helps with all the reservations and onboarding and payroll and HR. So a lot of that stuff on the day to day, I can step away from. We have great people. I mean, when I'm in Chicago, I'm there every day. I get there at 9 a.m. and I don't leave till 7 p.m. But normally I only have to like plug in when there was a tragedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, hey, we don't know what to do with this thing. So, by the time we moved in December 9th, 2017, we were, sort of like we had been open.
Very solid.
Yeah, we've been open 10 years. It was like a well-oiled machine. So, Sloane, 2018, I think she got number 3 in the world, lost in the finals of the year-end championships in Singapore. And then we took a break from December to, whatever. And then Monica Puig called me. I think she had lost first round in Australia and called me and said, hey, I see you're not in Australia. Are you available? And I said, yes, as of now, I'm available. So she actually comes to Chicago in the middle of a polar vortex. And at the time, I think she was like 75 in the world. Obviously had been ranked higher than that. Won the gold medal in 2016 and was just trying to return to form. So she came to Chicago and we started working together. And in 8 months, she went from 75 to 27. We got to the semis of Charleston, which was great. She beat Sabalenka.
Yeah.
Beat Danielle Collins. She beat Sarah Irani. Lost to Madison like late in the second set. So, really was playing well. Yeah. Went to the French Open and went to Strasbourg, lost to Sabalenka, beat her in Charleston, lost to her 5-5 in Strasbourg the week before the French Open. Get to the French Open and you beat Katsakina at the French Open that year, lost in the third round to Iga, right? And that was the first time that she had been to the third round of the French Open at any point in her career. And then went to Wimbledon, lost second round, and Wimbledon to Pliskova. Right, like 3-5, had a really good showing. Yeah, not bad. So really good year. So went from like 75 to 27 in a matter of 8 months. But like, really great person, great player, one of the hardest workers on tour, one of the best ball strikers I've ever been on a court with.
And now she's incredible. I mean, you can see, but you said hard working. Now she's a Ironman. She does triathlon all over.
Work ethic
shows
is like
still
second to none. I mean, everything we had worked on from fitness to hitting balls, 2-a-day practices. She actually got an apartment in Chicago. We were practicing twice a day. We talked about spending 8 hours on your job as if it was a traditional job. So a very enjoyable experience, working with her there and traveling with her was fun. Parents are great. Myself and OG Ottman, we worked together with Monica. So it was really good times. I mean, obviously beating Danielle and Sabalenka, it was some really good wins. And really, to be honest, should have beat Iga in the third round of French Open. She was up 6-0, 3-0.
Yeah.
Should have beat Iga to play Halep. End up losing the match. But again, that was like also a great run, beating Katsakina in the second round.
Those
are the things you remember, right? You remember you help a player, reach their career best at a French Open, right? Or get to the semis, in Charleston and have a great tournament, really a chance to get to the final. Yeah. And helping a player get back to 27. When a player comes to you at 75 in the world, like, look, I need to get back to where I am, right? And in 8 months, that's a great accomplishment.
Yeah. And so let's fast forward to 2024. You've built this great program, which I wanted you to talk about Access Academy as well, on the vision, what you're creating, how many kids you already help from just learning to play tennis to going to college now, great colleges, Northwestern, Notre Dame, and also about coaching. How you see coaching just improving from being on the tour as well? What do you think it needs to get better now that coaching is finally allowed?
Yeah, so I mean, the goal of Access Tennis was to provide like a cradle to grave sort of opportunity for kids in tennis, right? So we provide a great on ramp for 5 years old students to come in and pick up a tennis racket. We give free tennis rackets. We don't even need to have a racket, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Classes are like $20 an hour. So it's the cheapest game in town. And to come into an environment where it's like friendly and welcoming, and you don't have to like have a coaster under your Gatorade bottle. You know what I mean? You can kind of mess it up. We got money in the budget to repaint the wall every 6 months. So if you want to put your hands on the wall, it's totally fine. You know, tennis clubs are historically very stiff. And then, you know, also guiding them through the tournaments. We hosted 50 tournaments last year. So they had the opportunity to play tournaments at their home club, to feel welcome, and hopefully better their performance, right? Because you're playing in an environment that's familiar. And that improved performance helps improve their ranking, which helps improve them getting a scholarship, right? So historically, you know, getting a high ranking in USTA was a point. If you have a lot of money, you play a lot of tournaments, even if you don't win them all, you get a lot of points. And so we have tournaments in-house, USTA sanctioned tournaments, where the kids can get points without being the rich kid that can fly around the country every weekend, you know, to just gather points. I remember like I had 4 girls that were top 50 in the country in the USTA at the age of 14, and none of them had won a tournament. It's just from playing a lot. Every weekend you play a lot, you'll be top 50 in the country. You know what I mean? They had not held a single trophy. And that's when I realized that the point system was flawed, right? That there's a reward for being able to spend more money and stay in more hotels, buy flights, and then you can be top 50 in the country. So I want to kind of take that away, that barrier away from our players. So we host not only the lower level tournament, level 1. So now my dream was to be able to have a kid from our academy take public transportation to a level 1 without having to go to Palm Springs or San Diego. Or whatever. So that has happened. In addition to that, we have the ability to give wild cards. So if you host level 1, I get the 4 wild cards, and I have the opportunity to give wild cards to Black players who are also local. Sometimes all you need is a shot, right? I mean, think about pro tennis. Wild cards make all the difference in a pro career. Same thing in juniors. And so having that pro experience, bringing it down to the junior level, I understand how some kids just need a wild card just to get in the draw, right? Now, if you get a wild card, play number 1 seed, that's unlucky. But if you get a wild card, you end up in the middle of the draw. So that's our goal. And to date, we've sent 60 kids to college with full scholarships. We also house 6 universities in Chicago at that. So now we have colleges that are able to look at the players as they're coming up. We provide the ACT test prep. So now we know we're going to get you there in tennis. Now we have an opportunity to help you sort of take the test at the right time, right? Not like late. You can't take the test in December of your senior year, because by September of your senior year, UCLA is already giving out the scholarships, right? They're already committing. Kids are already committing, right? So it's all those nuances of, when do you need to have your best ACT, SAT score? When do you need to be reaching out to coaches? Like, don't make the mistake I did and sit there and wait for the game to come to you. When do you need to be proactive about reaching out? Now in the NIL phase, how do you navigate that? Like, perhaps NIL money from a small school is not as good as no NIL money from a larger school. You know, helping navigate that. So we're really trying to like
create a pathway.
Right? And then now through success coaching pro tennis, now my Rolodex is long enough where I can call college coaches and say, hey, I have a player. They're not top 50 in the country, but they can play. And I know what good looks like, so trust me. So, great relationships with schools like UCLA and Georgia and Louisville and Drake, and that, where I had the opportunity now to lend my reputation to my kid and help place them on a team that they want to go to, right? Or at least help them get an official visit when the coach had never heard of them. You know what I mean? So that, I take a lot of pride in that. And that's how they kind of connect, right? So that's how being on TV, being a pro coach, helps sort of connect it back to the community mission of helping these kids learn to play and get to college. Take a lot of pride in that. And that's like creating a vertically integrated organization. And then, going to pro tennis. Back in the day, we always would coach from the sideline, right? With WTA, we were able to do it legally, actually walk on the court and coach. And then now with all the stats and the video and all the technology that is available, I think it's gotten a lot harder, because I would say a coach that's not as good now has tools to help make them good, right? So back in the day when I was on tour, the best coaches to me were very instinctive, right? Or could calculate in their head while the match was going on, or could pick up on patterns while the match was going on. Then you get that 1 visit per set, boom. Here's what she's doing. Here's what we need to do, right? Now you sort of have a cheat sheet. And so, I think it's allowed more basic coaches to be a little bit better, right? And so it's made it a little bit more competitive.
Which in a way is good, right? It gives more access
Yeah, it's
to
raised the
more
level,
great
right? So
tennis
and if you look
players.
at women's tennis, now there's so many people that win every
Yeah,
week. You know,
yeah,
when back in the day, it was like the same people were winning every week. So aside from Iga and Sabalenka, every week somebody's winning. Somebody different is
yeah.
winning the 250s and that kind of thing. So I think it's more competitive. I think it's more precise. It's made the coaches have to work harder. And then in the middle of the match, you got to be really careful with your words. So I think coaches now have the opportunity to have a bigger impact on the result because you can actually talk. Where
Yeah.
back in the day, it's like all your work is done pre-match, and you sit
Mhm.
there and you hope the player don't choke, right? Well, now you have the opportunity to kind of insert yourself a little bit. So
Yeah,
it's a more
yeah,
dynamic environment where you
for
got to be
sure.
paying attention. You got to be like
Yeah.
choosing your words carefully and that kind of thing. So, and because it's so physical now, I think that scheduling is really
Hmm.
key. I mean, the game
Yeah.
is way more physical than it was
Was
back
there
in
was. Yeah.
2015. The athletes are bigger.
Yeah.
There's more tournaments. So you got to like sort of really become a master at scheduling and knowing your player, knowing when they need to just go
Hmm.
home and take a break. Right. So you
Yeah.
look at like some of the coaches that win a lot, regardless of who they're coaching.
Hmm.
It's those things. It's those things
Yeah.
they know, not just the stats, because everybody has the
Yeah.
stats now. Everybody has
Yeah.
the video now. Now it's like, how do you manage the player?
Yeah.
Right? How do you manage their psyche? How do you manage their body? How do you manage their mentality, the break, mental health, that kind of thing? I think that's
Yeah.
the art of it
Part of it.
that I think
Yeah.
is hard, right? I
So
think
what do you, that leads me to one of our final questions here. You today, Kamau, if you could give yourself advice when the younger Kamau was coming up, number one, what age would you choose to give that advice to the younger Kamau?
Mhm.
And what advice would you give him?
Man, that's a tough one. That's a good question. So, I think twofold. I would think the younger player. So if I had to give advice to the young Kamau player, it would be at 12 years old. 12 years old to just focus on tennis, take it more serious. It was a hobby for me that I just happened to be good at.
Hmm.
Um, and then to the young coach, I would say enjoy it more and not be so. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would take that because I think my attention to detail, like
Led you
me
where you
sort of
were.
like diving in and being psychotic about like preparation, I think that's what helped me help the player have the
Yeah.
success they've had.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would take that back, but I would say try to enjoy those, try to share those times
Hmm.
more because it's hard to get them back. It's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you know what? Nobody can come to this Grand Slam because
Yeah.
I don't want to mess it up. Right?
Yeah.
They can come to the next one. Right? There may not be a next one.
Next
So,
one.
find a way to sort of, really dig into the profession, but also find a way to share it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good one. All right. Last, we have some rapid fire questions here. So just answer whatever comes to your mind without thinking too much. Okay.
Yep.
Right. So one word to describe yourself as a person.
Honest.
One word to describe yourself as a coach.
Intense.
What are you most proud of in your life?
Helping every player that I've been on the court get a little bit closer to their dream.
What are you most proud of in tennis?
Building my center in Chicago because it's helped thousands of people, not just one.
What's your current dream?
To really find a way to create more on ramps for minorities in tennis.
What do you consider yourself as an advocate for?
Equality.
What athlete or coach you look up to?
Nick Saban.
Do you keep up with other sports or teams?
Only tennis.
Is there a favorite book or podcast that you would recommend?
Sacred Hoops by Phil Jackson.
And to wrap up, what's a quote, philosophy, or mantra that you like or live by?
Winning has to matter.
That's great. Well, I think that's a wrap. Kamau, thank you so much. Great to getting to know you better, and I think exposing your perspective and everything that you have brought from. I cannot keep up with how many jobs you have done in your life now and how many jobs you in a row. Appreciate you being here. Thank you everybody for listening. Please follow the podcast here. Please follow all the work that Kamal has done through his career, from the professional to access tennis. This goes beyond from a coaching perspective on the tour but you're building up the next generation. So I really appreciate your time here, Kamau, and hope to get to see you soon again on the tour.
All right. Thank you, Yannick. Thanks for having me.